nightmare.
Hello and welcome to Cinema Subculture, the channel where we discuss everything strange, obscure and downright messed up in the world of movies. My name's Gary.
And I'm Simon. And apparently we're a channel now, not a podcast. Woo, Gary.
We are now a channel.
We're YouTubers. I've always said you were a tube. So, Gary, what are we going to be discussing today?
So, The Burning from 1981, directed by Tony Maylam.
Yes. You got a wee synopsis for us?
A summer camp caretaker known as Cropsy gets badly burned in a teen prank and he returns to seek revenge on teenagers. Different teenagers than who burned them, right enough.
Sure, yeah.
Which is quite weird.
Sure.
And it's a different camp as well.
Is it a different camp?
That's it. Aye.
Oh, didn't
it goes to the one up the road.
Is it?
Rather than the original.
Jeez, wow, I missed that. Okay. I thought it was the same camp. Just made an assumption there on that.
So, Simon.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say that you are a bigger slasher film aficionado than me.
I'd say so, yeah.
So would you say The Burning is a slasher classic, or is it merely a pale derivative of its superior forebears Friday the 13th and Halloween?
You know, it's tough. It's a tough question to answer. I'd say it's kind of split down the middle. As far as like the characters go, you know, the teenagers from the actual film, what the effects and things like that are top notch. I'd say the characters are probably some of the most developed I've seen in a slasher film of that period. You know, Friday the 13th, Halloween, even Nightmare on Elm Street. I'd that probably comes the closest. But the teenagers are quite likable and they've all got quite distinct personalities. I mean, the cast's pretty spectacular when you see the people that are actually in the film and what they went on to do later. But for me, the killer, Cropsy, isn't a very memorable one. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. I was thinking about this because it's kind of, it goes on to the conversation of why didn't this become a series? Why didn't we get sequels? You know, and obviously the ending of it feels kind of, final. But you know, we've had plenty of final chapters in the slasher genre, but this didn't seem to go anywhere and pick up. And I was trying to think why that might be. So I think it could be to do with the killer. You know, you look at Friday the 13th, and even though it's more of a kind of whodunit rather than following a killer, when you find out who the killer is at the end of that film, it's quite an interesting, and I suppose at the time would have been more shocking than it is now, revelation, and it's quite interesting. There's a bit of backstory there, and there's a bit of kind of emotion to that there. Whereas Cropsy, straight from the opening, is kind of described, and whether you take these teens' word for it or not, as a bit of an asshole. He's kind of a jerk, and you don't really get anything with him. And even once he's in hospital and he comes back out, it's I don't feel we get much of who he is to be a memorable killer. And I think that's the magic sauce that all the other slashers have, is like, maybe not Friday the 13th, but like once they introduced Jason, certainly he was the one that continued film to film. Freddy Krueger was this, the star of that series. Michael Myers is still going, but for this film, it's flipped, and the teenagers are the main characters and the ones that are interesting. And kind of the ones you want to see more of rather than the actual killer. But I mean, it's not really a comment on how well the film's made, because I do think it is, up there and as good as well made as Friday the 13th or those other slashers of the time, especially some of the other, imitators. So it's a tough one. I mean, what would you say? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd probably say it's sort of a second tier slasher.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. Not up there with the best, but there's a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely very well made compared to a lot of them, the cheaper ones. But I think it's a good film, but it had potential to be so much better. It's got a lot of great elements. that it just seems overall it's been a missed opportunity. It seems like they had a script, but they've not nuanced it enough. They've got a lot of things up in the air, and I think the script's quite muddled. Um, so I think like the plot and the characterization need work. I think the Cropsey thing is interesting, as you said, because I think that's a potentially really good villain. But um, he's not developed enough, if you ask me. I think there's sort of pacing issues in the middle. Um, the teenagers are kind of all right. They're not really particularly likable, but there's a lot of time spent, I think, like with the teen banter, which is okay, but I do feel it's a bit over egged. It's a bit overwritten, and I don't necessarily think it really develops the characters much to make them particularly engaging. I mean, the banter's quite good. It's quite fun, but I think that's one of the problems with Jason Alexander's performance, who we know from Seinfeld, of course. Um, his performance is really good. He does well with a bit of a not a great not great lines in my opinion. I feel like the jokes are a bit forced. It's not quite natural enough to make him like a really engaging character. Um, yeah, we definitely needed more Cropsey, and I think there is so many subplots in the film that in the so many characters we don't get enough time with one kind of storyline. I would have liked it if we had more development of Cropsey, um, to we're told that Cropsey's a bad guy at the start, but we don't have any evidence of that. So then it just becomes like a guy seeking revenge without much nuance. We don't really know, how to feel about that. Are we meant to be sympathetic to him? Are we meant to be scared of him? A bit of both. So I feel that could have done with some work. Yeah, it sort of falls between the two stools of it's not quite bad enough to be so bad it's good. Laugh along, enjoy it, but it's not quite great. So it's a funny one because it's like very, very high production values, um, high quality acting, cinematography is beautiful, the score is great. Tom Savini's effects are probably the best thing in the movie. The kill scenes are fantastic, um, but it's just a one. Yeah, if they maybe just nuanced the script a bit more, fleshed out the characterization, cut a few bits and pieces, it could have been maybe a great slasher.
I'm surprised to hear you say that with the teenagers. I hadn't seen this film, like, as you say, I'm quite a big slasher film. I'd say that's kind of, I'm always looking for a new kind of 80s slasher type film that I haven't seen. And I heard about this one for a while. And when I eventually saw it last year, I was quite surprised at how much characterization the teenagers got for one of these type of films. I mean, again, comparing it to Friday the 13th, I think it is, the teenagers, there's they feel more realized than in those films. I think any of those films, to be honest with you, the Friday the 13th ones. So I'm surprised to hear you say that you didn't think that the teens were particularly likable. Some of them, but I think there was definitely a kind of the core group with Jason Alexander, Fisher Stevens, and the kind of the two other guys. I thought those were quite. I thought they were quite likable, and as I say, I thought that was a kind of standout compared to something like Friday the 13th, where, as I say, it is more about who's doing the killings, which I think works against this film. The fact that it isn't focused more on who done it, or on their killer. But yeah, I thought the characterization was a lot better
Right.
in this.
Maybe likable is the wrong word to use. They
Hmm.
are likable, I guess, but they don't necessarily feel like characters I really care about. If you compare it to Friday the
No.
13th, the
Hmm.
dialogue in that is so great. I think that just elevates that film a notch
Okay.
above the average. Whereas this feels like, oh, they've thought we need a kind of, a saucy script with some like sexy, like raunchy banter
Yeah, yeah,
between teenagers,
yeah.
and it fell a wee bit short in my estimation.
Okay. I'd still agree that Friday the 13th is a superior film, but yeah, as I said, I was surprised to see how much what characterization there was in this. Just haven't seen so many of other things, other slashes of this period. Talking about the writing and things like that, and I don't know if you want to talk about. So, like when I first saw this film, I didn't know anything about the film. I didn't know Jason Alexander was in it, or Fisher Stevens, or Holly Hunter's actually in this as well. But I really didn't know that this was the first Miramax film, and that it was essentially written partially by Harvey and Bob Weinstein. Um, I was reading a bit about the controversy around Harvey and stuff like that, and apparently it dates back to this film as well. It's been going on right from the first the first production, which is crazy. But yeah, that kind of took me back a little bit. I was like, oh, I didn't know. No, I didn't see that talked about much. It feels like with the kind of culture now that would have been a bigger thing when people are mentioning this film. There's a lot of controversy around Jeepers Creepers, for example, like, the director of that, and anytime that gets mentioned, it's kind of brought back to him, whether you like, those films or not. So I was surprised that I hadn't heard that the Weinsteins were involved in this. Just, I hadn't looked too much into it because I hadn't seen it yet. Worth mentioning.
Yeah, I think it's you see the film in a slightly different
Yeah.
light after the Weinstein revelations. I think because even compared to the normal levels of nudity you get in slashers, this seems to be a bit more pervasive. The teen nudity, it seems the camera lingers a bit more than normal. It's a bit more seedy,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. And even that the first kill, that feels very like, it doesn't feel like the rest of the film. Even the way that the get up that Cropsy's in, he's in the kind of fedora and the black jacket, like kind of, it's almost like a giallo film or something. It's almost out of something else.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like this film at all, and it feels like that's like a kind of just put in there for body count, or just to be a bit seedy. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what's the real point of that scene. It's an opportunity to give Cropsy some backstory, but it's a terrible scene in my opinion,
Yeah,
narratively, because like we don't. Why does he kill the prostitute? There's really no reason.
it's just it, like, because
Because he's just a bad man.
well, he's an asshole. The teenagers tell us at the beginning, but he's in this hospital for 5 years recovering from these terrible burns, right? And we see what he looks like at the end, which is a literal monster, right? Um, like, I don't know if it's accurate to burn victims at all. I don't think it is, but the point being that they seem to be like, so there's nothing more we can do for you, Mr. Cropsey. Off you pop. They wheel him to the door of the wheelchair, and then they're like, off you go now. Just like, and then he's like, I'm so fucking angry. And then, and he just goes out and kills that prostitute. Yeah, it is. It's very strange. But I think that whole, him going, you almost didn't need that going to the hospital stuff. You could cut out everything from the 1 week later in the hospital unit, with the burnt arm, even though it's a cool effect in the arm and stuff. You could have cut all that out and just have him come back. I think that would have added a little bit more mystery to, is it Cropsey, or what is it, or who is it, that type of thing.
Yeah, if we'd developed his motive a wee bit, if we'd been given more time with him,
The-
and developing a sense of right, he's going to return
Mhm.
and he's going to take revenge, rather than just like being with the teenagers, and then you've just got a random threat popping up from the woods. So you're sort of more character wise, and more with the teens, whereas it might have been more interesting to follow the revenge narrative
And,
and be more sympathetic to
and
Cropsy.
you
I
see
don't
you
know.
see a revenge narrative. I mean, unless I'm missing something, it's really not kind of revealed that the main kind of counselor Todd was one of the teens at the beginning until like almost the end. So then again, you're kind of not invested because you're like, why is he going after these people? Is it just the same reason he killed this prostitute? How does he even know that that's Todd? It's like they could have done like, but a week before he gets out of hospital, that guy comes to see him and like, tries to apologize, something like that. You know what I mean?
Mm, yeah. Another, you know, evidence that there wasn't a lot of thought went into the preparation,
Mm-hmm.
um, because that's a thing that could have made the film really great. The sort of morality of it, in
Mm-hmm.
the sense of, you know, guilt about that.
Yeah.
But then in the end, he kills Cropsey. Well,
Yeah.
eventually Alfred is the one that burns him, but he effectively kills him.
I think an axe
But
in the head will probably kill you.
there's no real sense of, well, Cropsey was a bad guy, but Cropsey was the victim
Mm-hmm.
of burning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you compare it to like Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger is a child killer
Mm-hmm.
murdered by the parents of the current teenage victims.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool because that's
Yeah.
like you've got layers there. So Kruger's coming back to seek revenge on the children of the people who committed a crime against him. So the teenagers are innocent. Um, Whereas in this case, like Todd's kind of mixed in there, so he's actually guilty,
Yeah. Yeah.
a guilty party, uh, and it's not. It's what also makes this slasher unusual is you've not got a final girl.
Yes. Yeah.
Traditionally, that's the sort of virgin character, the innocent one who takes out the monster.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this is a final guy who is also guilty of creating the monster in the first place.
Yeah.
So everything's a
Yeah.
bit kind of all
Yeah.
over the place there. But I don't know. They could have done more with the Alfred character. Made him the final.
Well, something I was thinking about when you were saying about the morality of it all. I mean, let's. I mean, we're not here to fix the film, but let's you tweak Todd a little bit into someone who is guilt ridden. Does see Alfred maybe like in this girls' showers like or playing pranks on people, whatever, and takes that really seriously and chides him and tries to take him under his wing. About pranks can get people killed. All that this kind of deeper morality and stuff like that, which could have had a nice little arc for the Alfred character if he was going to be your final guy. The second thing about that is I was listening to the commentary on this, and the director was talking about so the girl that goes into the guy into the water, like strips off and stuff, right? He
Right.
comments that she wasn't a particularly good actress, right? Now, like traditionally, I think that character would have been our final girl, almost. She refuses to have sex. She gets back out. She leaves, right? And just when you're saying it there, I'm wondering is there a link between the fact that she maybe wasn't that great a performer, and okay, she's getting killed off. We have to again change lanes because they didn't really know where they were going in the first place. I wonder if there was anything to that. But I guess these rules hadn't really been kind of set up yet at this point. I mean, this was the same year. This was a year after Friday the 13th came out. Halloween 2 was 81. So it really hadn't got into the kind of this deep fervor, I don't think, of the slashers, or at least it's claimed by the Weinsteins that this was written before Friday the 13th, even. Um, so all of those things, and then them pivoting to try and like make it more commercial in some ways. It does feel like a bit of a scramble.
I was going to make that point because it is easy to say, oh, a year after Friday the 13th, it feels so similar
Mhm.
that it's just a complete rip off. But you're right to say that the idea for the script was written before Friday came out. But it does seem that they developed a script with the conventions in mind,
Yeah.
because it's funny that you're right, it is quite early in the genre, but it's got all the conventions there,
Hmm. Yeah.
pretty much. It feels like it was the main motivation for the film was a money making cash in to some degree. It wasn't, you know, let's make a great film, let's take our time. I think that's obvious in the fact that one of the things that stands out to me about the film is there's not a sense of auteurism in any fashion. You know, there's none. You can. It feels quite. It's well made, but it's conventional. It's functional. You wouldn't say there's director's flair there. There's screenplay was notable. Cinematography was notable. You know, none of that really stands out particularly stylish in any way. So yeah.
But I wanted to come back to what you were saying about, a kind of cash grab, or they're making it to make money. And I totally believe that's true. I've no doubt about that at all. I think you're right. But it is fair to say that I think even Sean Cunningham from Friday the 13th would admit that was the reasoning behind Friday the 13th. It was a quick money maker. But it's funny to see how two different directors and writers can essentially come up with a very similar premise for the same reasons. And we're 12 Friday 13 films in now.
Yeah.
No, not
Right.
even one.
Just to come back to nuance that point a wee bit. Yeah. I think it was true they were trying to cash in on the slasher boom, but at the same time, it doesn't feel cynical.
Mm.
The film, it feels there's a bit of
You mean
heart to
Friday
it.
the 13th?
It's no, the Burning.
Oh, okay, right, okay, yeah.
You know, sometimes think, oh, they're just in for a quick buck.
Mhm.
It's a really shoddy piece of work, way, and you can feel that coming off the
Yeah,
screen. Whereas this does feel like there's a bit of heart to it, even though, as we were saying, it seems to have been made a bit
yeah.
roughshod.
Uh,
It's good vibes to
Yeah,
it.
I think a lot of that does come from the cast, who I think are quite strong, even if the story isn't particularly anything special. I think all the characters, more or less, all the characters have like kind of memorable sequences, or conversations, or but I'd say other than the camp counselors, I wasn't that, even Todd. Like, he was kind of what do you say, like, just kind of bland, but again, it's hard to, like, when you've got like Jason Alexander, and the likes in the cast, it probably is hard to kind of stand up against those kind of characters and stuff. But
Yeah, I think that was one of the problems. They should have picked a narrative focus.
mhm,
You've got the Todd angle, which could have been good. You've got the Alfred character, which he could have been the final boy,
mhm.
because he's essentially he's potentially an innocent. I think they fuck him up by making him so unlikable, making him like a peeping tom.
Yes,
Uh, but he's sort of like the Cassandra, for want of a better word, the sort of predictor of the future.
sure,
He's like the guy who knows his danger
yeah,
coming.
yeah, yeah,
So he's like the kind of the audience's, the chorus telling the audience what's happening. But we could have made him more likable and made him the sort of conduit through the violence to the kind of redemption
hmm
by purging the evil monster.
yeah.
But they make him such like a whiny kind of pervert.
Yeah, like,
They ruin
when
him.
he gets
They
caught
ruin
coming out of
him.
the
Aye.
showers after like
Yeah.
creeping on that girl, it's like he doesn't even seem remorseful. He's almost like upset that they've like it's hard to see. It feels like he's playing the victim almost. Like, he's like, "Why did you stop me?" Like, or it feels like so moany, and it's like there's no remorse, or kind of you know, like he doesn't seem to understand what he's done. I think you're right. I think there's something to be said about that, and even with the kind of Glazer, the bully type character, he's actually probably a little bit more likable in the rest of the film, than Alfred can be. So yeah, it is a weird one.
What is he meant to be? One of
Yeah,
the the counselors or
no,
one of the
he's meant to be one of the
teenagers?
teenagers, but he's actually older
Right.
than
Okay.
anyone. I think he's the oldest cast member, like, other than
Right.
I
Like that.
think
Aye.
he's older than all the counselors and stuff. But yeah, obviously the big set piece of this film, really, and the reason it was put onto the video nasties list, I would say, is the raft scene, which is like kind of the most kills in one place probably in most of these slasher films. I think five victims, all in one scene essentially. I don't think that's. I can't think of another film that has quite that. Hmm. I'd have to think further, but yeah, it's quite spectacular, and as you say, Tom Savini's special effects, a lot of quick cuts, a lot of kind of clever placement of people and things like that. The fingers getting chopped off, and I think it's I thought that was quite enjoyable, and probably one of the better kill sequences in these early slashers. Um, Definitely worthy of his kind of work in Friday 13th. I'd say.
I think that scene's quite cool. It's kind of ridiculous, the fact he's just hanging in the canoe
And
waiting for
the
them
build up
coming.
to it as well, that it's edited is so. I heard the editor was like the editor was actually the guy that directed Nightmare on Elm Street Part Two, but
All right.
the way he was told to like, draw it out, he'd edited it a certain way, and it was normal pace for how he saw how it had been shot, and the Weinsteins, and then the director had said like you have to slow it down and take longer, and it's just like it just became this kind of joke of a build up to it. But yeah, you're right. Like I mean, it's not a very big canoe,
Right.
and how he stands up so quickly. I mean, have you ever tried standing up in a
Yeah.
canoe?
I do love the shot though, the famous shot of the silhouette of Cropsey with the shields
Yeah.
silhouetted against the sky. That's a good shot.
Apparently, the director played Cropsey in most of those scenes. He couldn't anyone
Yeah.
to get the glint off the blades. As I understand it, this was one of the first films to be put on the Nasties list.
I'm not sure the timeline.
Right.
The funny thing about this in relation to the Nasties is that it's definitely one of the better films that turned up on the Nasties list, and it's one of the most well made, and it was distributed by a kind of more reputable company.
Sure.
It was released on VHS by Thorn EMI.
Right. Oh, okay.
And strangely, the film was passed by the BBFC with cuts, but then it was mistakenly released uncut on VHS, which then led to it being prosecuted
Right.
and being one of the final obscene movies, despite the fact that it's essentially been released.
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so I think the takeaways from this film, it's a solid slasher, very well made, functional, maybe a lack of style, but enjoyable and worth a watch.
Yeah, totally.
If you've not seen it.
If you've not seen it, yeah, and if you like the kind of,
despite we've just spoiled all for you, but
should we start putting spoiler alerts at the beginning of these? Probably should. I think we said back in the day that was kind of we were going to spoil it.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I think it's definitely worth a watch. I can't believe it took me so long to see it. As I say, these are exactly the type of films that I kind of really enjoy and seek out. I've checked out plenty over the years. I've been, just go nowhere and aren't very fun to watch or well made. So this was really a wee treat to kind of come across one that I hadn't seen before.
So please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment.
Don't forget to smash that notification button so you can be notified of when we have new episodes coming out, hopefully weekly.
You've been listening to Cinema Subculture. I've been Gary.
And I've been Simon.
It was a nightmare.
You dropped it a bit.
Yeah, you dropped it a bit just before that as well. Sorry.
Okay.
I just kept going with it. I can roll with these things, me. So yeah, the shears. I was thinking, is it maybe because he's meant to be like a janitor or like a groundskeeper? He's like.
Mhm. Yeah.
He's.
I wish we had seen some stuff of him being a crabbit groundsman. Get off my grass, you daft cunt. That type of thing.